Hello and good evening to one of the many webinars organized by the English Department of the Self-Financing of Thiagarajar College, Thuthukudi, and very warm welcome from Thuthukudi, Tamil Nadu, India. And before moving into the actual webinar, I would like to start off this wonderful event by giving homage to the motherland by Tamil IYAL. I hope I'm audible to everyone. The title of the webinar is The Strong Gender. I think that's the ultimate truth, and everyone has to admit that given the present situation. And what we have here today is a great and monumental event to showcase the true power of the female gender. And beyond all technical errors that we are facing here today, I'm so glad that we are continuing this webinar right now. So some of the things that I would like to bring to your notice. One of the most important things that we are here to discuss right now is we have Dr. G Banumadhi from Thiagarajar College, Madurai, Tamil Nadu, India, and she's going to just sweep you off your feet with an excellent session where you will actually get to learn what exactly is feminism, and the things that the misconceptions that you would have had would be cleared from this session. And our beloved audience, what more can I say about you? You have been with us from the very beginning, and I think this is our 7th webinar in YouTube. Thank you all for joining us once again. I hope we will all have a great show, and don't forget that we have Dr. Priyamvada Gopal, all the way from Cambridge, United Kingdom, and being a very busy author, she has offered her valuable time to give us another fabulous interview in the platform called IYAL. I hope all our regular audiences would remember that this would be the 4th episode of IYAL. And this is a platform where we interview some of the most brilliant writers of the world, and we hope to continue this venture further along. Before we start the first session, I would like to bring to notice certain personalities of our institution whom we are forever indebted to. First of all, I would like to thank our principal, Dr. D. Nagarajan, and our director of the self-financing wing, Dr. A.M. Tony Melvin, and our head of the department, Mrs. M. Shamala, who has always been a supporting hand to orchestrate all these webinars throughout. And without the motivation and support of all our members of the department, these webinars would not have been a possibility. And we are wholeheartedly thankful for them for all their positive energy and vibrance. And we will never forget it, and we shall strive our best to repay everything that we have got till today. So, moving on, I would like to thank each and every person who had made this webinar a possibility despite all technical errors and unfortunate problems that we have bound to face. And with nothing further to do, I would like to offer the chair to Dr. G Banumadhi before to give another wonderful session. And I would like to play a video for commemorating her session.
Greetings. Now, with a resilient fervor to astonish all our vibrant minds, the stage requires Dr. G Banumadhi. We have here with us the gracious presence of a very experienced educationist and a versatile motivator. Dr. Banumadhi is an assistant. Greetings. Now, with a resilient fervor to astonish all our vibrant minds, the stage requires Dr. G Banumadhi. We have here with us the gracious presence of a very experienced educationist and a versatile motivator. Dr. Banumadhi is an assistant professor in the Department of English at Thiagarajar College, Madurai from Tamil Nadu, India. She and her noble journey to spread education has guided many aspirants in their PhD, a person who is ever on the verge to develop herself. She has authored many articles and has given a vast number of interesting lectures. The first session should be a thought-provoking one which shall enable us to reach an elevated state of understanding the concept of feminism.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And so now I'd like to offer the chair to Dr. G Banumadhi to continue with another great session. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to meet you all on this virtual platform. So today's topic, feminism, to learn, unlearn, and relearn, is something where I would like to share my opinions regarding feminism. So, yes, 1 minute. Yes. Yes. So waves of so when we speak about feminism, we cannot avoid talking about the waves of feminism, and what I wanted to focus here is not the waves of feminism. That when we retrace the course of women's revolution, we could find out that the waves of feminism happened in mid 19th century, the early 1900s, the early 1940s, and the early 1970s. Okay, all this tide, it was there. But what about the ebb? Why in between years, the intermittent years, the progress of women's right is strangely reversible? What happened to there? What happened there? Why such a silence? Let us look into that halting gain. So what is that there? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am,
Am I
you're audible.
audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're
Yes,
audible.
yes, yes,
But your
yes. And
screen
is
is
it?
a bit blank. Can you try turning on your video and
Yes,
trying
yes,
sharing your
yes,
screen?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
1 minute, Prem. 1 minute.
It's okay, ma'am. You can take your time.
I think I'll continue with the PPT. And is the PPT visible?
No,
I'll come.
ma'am. Your PPT is also not visible.
Okay, okay. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Video தூசலப்பா. ஏன் இங்க பண்ணிட்டவேப்பா. ஓ சாமி. PPT. PPT பா. Okay. So this is I'm sorry for the technical snag there. And so here we have we have the picture that is there where women have roamed helplessly and naturally as eternal passive subjects there. So why this happened? Why the silence there? Why the peaks and valleys? So this curve, the ups and downs in women's progress or women's revolution, It is because of the warnings, the comments from scholars, religious leaders, medical experts, and pundits. So it is this which had made them, might be, which had hampered their progress. Next slide. Into next slide. So military terms. So when we talk about women's advances and retreats, we find that such military terms are used: battles won, battles lost, points and territories gained and surrendered. Now this is something like as if a conflict is going on between two battalions, neatly arrayed on either side. But what we miss is this entangled nature. When you have two parties, two troops, two battalions, so we must have both the conflict with force there. But here what is missing is the reactive nature of man, the struggle, where they don't react as such there. But we have to notice there is a force and furrow of the backlash churn beneath the surface that is invisible to the public eye. Man, he reacts in a very silent manner. It is invisible to the public eye there. And there are comments as like this there: when a woman postpones childbearing, triggering as if she's triggering race suicide, and as if she's bringing a crisis to the race there. And when married women demand rights, they are charged as if they are creating crisis to the family itself as such there. Now, such comments, such subtle bias is something which have made women even not to accept that they are supportive of feminism, or even if they quietly support feminism in the feminist platform, they are not ready to acknowledge that they are a feminist as such there. Even the few women who have advanced, they want to prove that they are interested in advancement. So you could have noticed, even when we speak to writers, when we ask them whether they are feminists, they not many accept that they are feminists there, because it comes with a negative tag, and they don't want to be ghettoized with that. They don't want to be put into that box there. So saying one is not a feminist is a prudent and self-protective manner. And even young girls too, so who are the beneficiaries of the early struggles. So we all have to accept that. So when for all this revolutions and for all the struggles that women made earlier, only because of that I'm addressing such a gathering, and there are many women who are listening to all the things related to feminism there. So what we should do as such there. Now here, what we have learned all these things there. We have to make it very clear to young girls who are the beneficiaries of early struggles, that they must not take feminism for granted. It is not to be taken for granted, and they have to acknowledge the earlier battles, struggles made by women. And the guiding principles of feminism. What would be the guiding principles of feminism as such there? Women should think for themselves. Of course, we all know we have to think for ourselves, but we must not stop with thinking for ourselves there. There are many women who are there outside who don't even know that they are being subjugated. So usually this is something where I face whenever I handle women's studies class as such there. When the majority are girls and only a few boys in the class, they would ask me, so many women visible, haven't you progressed? Do we need women's studies class? Do we need women's studies paper as such there? So I have to make it very clear to them that the people whom they see, the privileged, are only a minority, especially in a country like India. So the majority are there out into the world who don't even know that they are being subjugated, they are being oppressed. So that is a main aspect there, where women don't even know that they are being subjugated. The harassment is not only physical, it is mental harassment which goes on other areas of middle class and other areas of women belonging to other classes as such there. And we have to mentor less privileged people. That is what we have to learn. We have to encourage them, we have to support them, and mentoring the less privileged, and making them understand where they stand, what they have to do, and how they have to do is a criteria of women who have progressed to some extent as such there. And it is not that we are not interested in advancement. So we women shouldn't say as such there. We also have to understand that our lives are far better than our mothers. and her life is something different from her mother as such there. So we had been going on in another, we are a little bit progressing as such there. So education is one key which had given us this advantage. And what is missing as such there, it is a women's when there is a collective quest there, when there is a collective search as such there, this collective quest, it takes a backseat. And many women, so we are many women they are caught in this certain fabricated backdrop there. Many women, they follow, even though there are people who talk about universal womanhood as such there. But we have to understand, a few women as such there, they are caught into the loyalties, in compelling ideologies as such there. So to the group they belong, to the caste, the community, to the group, to the religious group they belong, they are compelled to follow the ideologies there as such there, even though they have this quest as such there, and their search is there. But in all such search, so instead of uniting, what happens is they are turned, and frustration inward happens there. And instead of assailing injustice, women, they have learned to adjust. And instead of going against, they become depressed as such there. Now the in between years, the what is lost is the collective spirit. Very important is the networking, which is missing in women as such there. So where we lack is this, where we lack is networking. So we don't have a strong networking as such there, which is also one of the reason for such breaks, such in between years silence as such there, such peaks and valleys as such there. And another essential point is solidarity. So women against women, at times we have this traditional womanhood, and the moral policing is done more by women rather than men in the families as such there, and especially in Indian families. So we have the mother being mother moral policing us there, how to behave and how to do as such there. So if you are a woman who have a knowledge about all these things, educate them too. It is not wrong. There's nothing wrong to educate even elder women to how their lives are, how better our lives are, and how we have to go on as such there. So this solidarity among women, that is lacking there. So once when there was a women's convention, and when women belonging to the African community, so when they were asked about this feminism and women's convention, so they said, first let us come out of racism, and then let me talk about feminism for us there. So even in that convention, there are prejudice, there are bias between women as such there. So all these things are things which we have to do away with, and we have to progress as such there. So this collective spirit is one factor which is missing as such there, which is not found among women. At least in the earlier periods, we had a lot of things, a lot of the space, geography were apart, and we were apart culturally. But now that technology has connected, and so now, even now, worldwide people are watching as such there. So this is something where it has given us space, but that too has its own disadvantage, which I'll speak about in the later slides as such there. Now, whenever feminists have optimistically figured about this merits of their cause there, even then men don't take it. There is a male hostility there. They feel that when they give away, when they say, when they demonstrate, or when they talk about the merits regarding feminism, male hostility would go away there. But it is they have found out also that they were disappointed that it has not disappeared there, but it has grown and deepened male hostility. So we would even quote Mahatma Gandhi, who stood for women's cause, Rajaram Mohan Roy, or Nelson Mandela. There are men too who support women's cause, of course, yes, but we have to understand they are only the 5 to 10% of men who support women's demands for independence, but the majority favor traditional roles for women. We must not be taken away by a few women who are supportive as such there, but we have to understand the majority. We have to take in mind always the majority, not be taken away by the minority as such there. So men, they interpret small advances in women as if they have got everything, and their projects are complete. They believed women had made a quite a substantial progress there, but women and everything is over. That is, it has come to an end. Now, post feminism talks like that. Women have achieved everything, and women have got everything as such there, and there is nothing more to talk about feminism. But women believe the struggle only has begun now as such there. So in each period, we have a lot of other things which are hampering our progress. And in the present day, we know that we are in a historic situation where we are facing this COVID-19 has utterly changed, has topsy-turvied our life as such there. It has overturned our life, and we are facing a lot other issues there. And records are to come about the lives of women who had been in the lockdown as such there. And that too, we will see in the later slides as such there. So when we are talking about when we try to gauge the level of male resistance there, we can gauge it, we can even assess that, but we can't explain the reason why man is so against his the resistance is so strong against women's progress. Now, social investigators, they have not tackled the man question. So we don't, we usually they talk about the women's problem as such, they, the women's issues, what they want, what they like, and how they have progressed. But there is a little study about why man is against this. That is one aspect where we have to focus on. Of course, Virginia Woolf had spoken about it in her room of one's own, talking about how him, how she has to magnify his part, and if at all, if she fails to magnify, how they feel bad as such there. Now, the works on masculinity too. When we try to trace if there are any works on masculinity, we find it is barely, it fills a bookshelf there. And literature on manhood is very less complex and burdensome, offer no assurance. So they find out, all these studies, they find out that masculinity is a fragile hothouse there. And if at all there is a violation of sex roles, severe consequences, man has the severe consequences is on man rather than females as such there. So we find all these things happening in our own Indian way of life as such there. So how man is really, he could not take as such there. In only in very few cases, man supports completely women as such there. Even though if she's working and she is the breadwinner of the family, it is not. It is not much in the sense that they don't take it so progressively. They try to suppress her even in that case too. So to keep her in her own space, women herself feels that she has to compromise. She must not magnify her part, and she must, even in such case, the man who is sitting idle at home, if a woman is a breadwinner, to magnify his part and not to see that he is happy and he doesn't feel bad about women's progress as such there. This many women do. And the hyperbolic male as such there. So the overreaction that man does. So I have given so many quotations, see, from a long time. So I wanted to show that how these things started very long back. So there are talk, there are speech that women did well in ancient days there, but only now their plight has gone in a very deplorable manner. But it is not so. See, look at Cato, what he says. So women have become so powerful that our independence has been in our own homes and is now being trampled and stamped underfoot. So here in 195 BC, and for what did he say that? A few Roman women who sought to repeal and certain laws, and from riding chariots and wearing multicolored dresses. For that, he says. And you have John Knox, who says the first blast of the trumpet against a monstrous regiment for the possibility that two royal women might occupy the throne in Europe at the same time. So it provoked John Knox to say that in 16th century it is so. Now you have William Goody, who says men view even small losses of difference, advantages, or oppositions as threats. So this is sociologists are puzzled there. So why such reaction on male even for minuscule improvements. It's not even major improvements, minuscule improvements in women's life as such there. So this is one thing. So even when a woman is promoted as such there, the women are taking over is again a refrain where in many workplace as such there. But for only one or two women when they are promoted, while the top management is still solidly male, when women are promoted, this is what the exaggeration that is made when women progress, even in minuscule as such there. So now what exactly is about women's equality, that even it's these are things which we have to probe into, which we have to think about. What is that the shadow that threatens male identity? What is it about the way we frame manhood? So we have to think not only about womanhood, but about manhood. So what is there, and what is the definition of masculinity? So masculinity is not being a leader, is not being an athlete or a decision maker, but just this, a good provider for family. So whenever this these losses in earning power, they feel that they breed other losses. So this is the popular conception of masculinity, and which is lying heavy on men, and especially the growing adolescent there. So we have internalized, as we have internalized certain views in women, we have internalized certain views in male too. So this economic polarization, so observations point out economic polarization is the most dramatic attitudinal change. It brings most dramatic attitudinal change. They feel very powerless, and that makes them feared and reviled feminism. So they that is something, a final blow to their pride and identity. So that anxiety when they have insecure employment, everything as such there, and they fix it on women. Now we have to, one important thing is, we have empowered women, but we have not taught our men how to live with empowered women, and how to go on with the society with empowered women. So we have to teach in the very present latest recent work of Chimamanda Adichie, where she says, so we have to be feminist as such there. So where she speaks about this aspect there, where we have failed to teach boys or men that how certain views we have internalized as the society progresses, how this attitudinal changes must be brought. This we have to unlearn certain concepts, certain views which we have internalized, and we have to relearn according to the situation, that the role reversal is something which is unavoidable. The role reversal, which gives something, if the role reversal happens, how to live in an amicable manner and how to go on as such there. So this is one thing which we have to relearn, how we have to teach not women about their roles, about their internalizing or socializing or conditioning them to all these attitudes. We also have to internalize and condition men, boys as such, they growing boys as such they, that there is nothing wrong in a woman earning, and how to live with empowered women is another case in point as such there. Now so this is once again it goes on with the fears that when men have the society, how it projects its fears onto a female, and that fear is that fear is something by controlling women, so pushing them and shrinking them, and in the imagination to a manageable size as such there, and forever they want this feminine women to be static and childlike. And these images of restrained women, it is always there in the pictures, the movies, the fashion and beauty industries, all project or all showcase that the demure and retiring child woman is what is likable. So we are taught as if we have to be presentable, likable, and compromise with a lot of things to make ourselves pleasant and appealing to the society as such there. And this restrained woman of the current, she distinguishes from her predecessor, One important thing, whenever we have a change, a radical change to come over, we don't have role models as such there. We don't have predecessors. We don't have progressive role models. And even if there is a role model, as I have said, they are not ready to accept that how they came up, the advancement they had made, and that they are not feminist. So such things are there. So whenever somebody tries to make a radical change in the society, let it be Socrates, so he was poisoned, we know. Let it be Gandhiji, he was assassinated. So even Jesus Christ, he was crucified. So it's not easy to make the society accept the changes as such there. So women who have progressed, women who have come up from all their troubles, struggles there, they have to share, and they have to be a role model for other people as such there. So such stories are missing, and the missing stories, like the missing mothers in Shakespeare's play. So we have the missing stories as such there. We have to make it a point as such there, where we have to make it known to the whole world by sharing and by recording the progress that women have made as such there, to give an encouragement to women who feel very bad as such there. So unless a woman shares her own trouble as such there, nobody would know. A very important topic which I think we must speak about in these days as such is this. So usually, whenever talking about woman is a body, so woman as body is the major thing. Usually, women are always noticed, so they look only into her physique as such there. And we have like a feminist like Helen Sixu, who says, write yourself, your body must be heard. So it is not only about the emotional aspect she speaks about. So write your body is about feminine writing. So what do we write about in the feminine writing as such there? So most of the time we find very rare records about the happenings in the physiology of a woman. We don't have records about what happens in a woman's body in all the stages of life. We don't have records about a woman recording about the puberty. Very rarely we have, and that too is not we are not sensitized regarding that there. So in the past Olympics, and a sports person, I think she's an athlete. So she shared that how her performance went down because of her monthly ordeal. So we have never even thought about what happens to that women. So when they are, how do they cope up with all the physical discomforts during such events there? So this is one thing which even triggered our thoughts there. So how do they do? So their performance, it is not to be blamed, they are not to be criticized or condemned. So when she spoke to the public about the discomfort she had to face, and how she had to, in spite of how she could do well, how she could do that. And another one aspect is, so these things are where we have to, so even if women write about it, there are cases where we feel delicate to discuss about such things, in even when it is prescribed, even it is a study as such there. We don't, in certain traditional societies, even in India as such there, so even if it is prescribed, we don't discuss much about such things as such there. So this is one thing which we have to unlearn, and we have to relearn, to record what is happening. Unless it is vocal, people will not know. So even this body shaming, a very important aspect as such there. We know that how the special targets are celebrities. Of course, the stress on them to keep themselves fit, to keep size zero, to have to be in size zero as such there, and how they retreat in shame. So when they put on weight, or when the obesity there, and how they try hard to bring back to their, to as they were in their youth. So this is something where they may be inspiring stories, but we have to also notice, if they share, how difficult it had been for them, and how the phases they undergo, the phases a woman undergoes. So the pregnancy period, so after that, how a woman's physique changes, how she puts on weight, and that how it is because of the social norms, the beauty standards that have been spoken by. So that is something where it is giving her a psychological imbalance. When a woman has to go to work, She has to be conscious about her dressing. She has to be conscious about her body as such there. And one aspect is motherhood, of course. So that is another one aspect there. While talking about body as such there, the happenings in a woman during motherhood and the post delivery, when women undergo certain psychological imbalances, such things have to be recorded, and have to be sensitized, have to be popularized, so that women who are the future women, the posterity will have a clear idea. So for what, why is it happening into her, why is she psychologically depressed? So that is one aspect as such there. And we, as many feminists have spoken, motherhood is something where high praises are given, and it is a trap as such there, where women are expected to fit into that motherhood. They have to sacrifice. So masochism is an unexpected norm as such there, an unexpected norm in motherhood as such there. So we in all these phases of life, in all this period of life, women must understand. So it is normal for her to be imperfectly perfect in one particular age as such there. She has to come across a lot of phases, especially when they are aging, when they have menopause, when they come across a lot of psychological imbalance, hormonal imbalance, which creates a lot of physical discomforts and mental discomforts. There is nothing to feel guilty, and there is nothing to feel ashamed of your own body. What is worth it is your self-worth. And for all this shaming, body shaming as such there, where does it start? It starts here. The beauty standards as such there, the beauty standards, the beauty standards and the social campaigning regarding the beauty standards. So we have this idea, a porcelain and unblemished exterior. It becomes a proof of women's internal purity, obedience, and restraint. So this is something which we have nowadays. We are internalizing such ideas too. The internal purity and obedience and restraint is something where externally it appears as such there. And because of that, we have a lot of youngsters. So the wasting away look, and there's unleashed dieting mania, so which leads to anorexia. So in young women, so they are not even aware as such there. So what is essential for them? So what is in contrast? What we have to educate them, what we have to relearn is, that is not more important, but it is things like being robust, being active, being healthy, and vivid color are the properties of female beauty. So your self-worth, your self-esteem doesn't lie in your external beauty. And the way we try to reverse the aging process. So it's an ancient and famous quest there, using sun shields, anti-aging products, cell renewal, and body sculpting. All these things, studies say that they're all fraudulent practices there. And such studies don't come to limelight because of the industry that is going on behind. Such things never come to the limelight, and we are taken away by the advertisements, we are taken away by the offers and other things about related to this cosmetic industry there. Now we have to unlearn and we have to relearn. Let us not allow the cosmetics and fragrances to define us. It is our self-worth, not in external appearances there, but it is our self-worth and self-esteem that makes us a woman, as a dignified woman as such there. And so don't battle with your own anatomy as such there. So here we have to unlearn and we have to relearn, not to choose to hunt for the fountain of youth. So each age, each phase has its own beauty, and seeking to build a life of our own amidst the overpowering currents is what we have to strive for. And we must not don't belong to a culture that barely records these currents. We have to reinforce to women that let us not battle with our own anatomy as such there, and how to be healthy, and active as such there. That is a lesson we have to teach them. It is internally the healthy food which we eat that makes us externally beautiful, and not all the cosmetic products, of course. So this comprehensive transformation must be made in all the levels as such there. So you can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do without any criticism directed at you. Even if it is any criticism directed at you, you need not worry about that. You have to show that you are a strong gender, and a comprehensive transformation must be made at every level of the beauty culture. We must, of course, we know. So what happened to the famous actress as such there, who, that is, it is rumored that is one of the reasons for her death as such there. I think Indian women do understand, do know for whom I am referring to. So whom we have missed in her 50s because of the invasive and dangerous operations they undertake to appear beautiful, to appear always young, even at that age as such there. So it is nothing wrong to appear beautiful, but at the same time, that is not what makes you beautiful. So we don't want beautiful dolls, but we want women with dignity and self worth, self esteemed women. So this is one thing in this digital world, how even now women face harassment. The recent news about the online classes that is going on, and how a teacher in Kerala, how within hours of the classes going on air, how they people started to circulating trolls and memes about this particular teacher, about a blue sari teacher, and there were fans and clubs mushrooming, and in it is something where there were mixed views, mixed responses there. A teacher who is taking class and she's not performing anything as such there. So there were comments and admiration for the teacher. At the same time, there were expressions of romantic interest and this objectification of her body. See the blue sari teacher. So that is the way she had been addressed there. So this digital harassment is one another new arena where we women have to face, where women have to find means and ways to curb it. And this digital harassment is, we must have the courage to expose it there. So if it had not been online, so we would not be aware of what is happening. So a teacher who is doing a noble profession, so the hampering, the obstacles a woman had to face so while teaching there. So now coming on to this coronavirus as such there, we can't move out without making a mention of what is happening in the present day COVID-19 situation. The pre-existing inequalities has deepened, of course. So personally, I have come across a lot of women who are unable to absorb these economic shocks and are at greatest. This is the 70% of women, the unskilled, unorganized arena there where women work as such there. And because of financial independence along with control of finance, so women are bound to relationships. So they have to compromise with exploitation and abuse. And in such a situation, there where we are not supposed to talk about such issues, and we give prime importance to talk about the pandemic there. Our critical thinking to capitulates in the face of fear. So when we are afraid, our critical thinking to goes on. So what we have to relearn is, we have to keep our critical thinking alive in the midst of this crisis for us to be able to imagine the world and life after the pandemic. So it is very highly imperative that we have to record happenings during the pandemic as such there. The issues related to women, how they had to face, how they had to juggle with work at home and the second shift as taking into the household chores as such there. So this is something where women had to face, and a very important point as such there. So the studies reveal in the majority of middle class as such there, so the psychological abuse is a very important aspect which is never highlighted at all. Always usually they talk about the physical and sexual abuse, but very subtle manner the psychological abuse happens to women. They are not even aware about that there. So they are, how they are deprived of basic needs, and how they are harmed mentally and physically and verbally too. And now in the situation, so there are increased incidents, but the complication in reporting, I have to make a mention here. See, even though in spite of the constitutional rights and the laws made, and the self-help or the women help numbers are there, we honor because of a lot of aspects. Even women really hesitate to lodge a complaint or to report regarding the physical harm that is done to them, or the verbal abuse done to them as such there. And also the community support too. In COVID-19, when everybody are in the lockdown, so there is diminished resources, and a lot of women experience chronic distress, and a lot of women experience chronic distress. I myself have come across a lot of women whose tension, and how they are experiencing varied mental health concerns as such there. And in all these things, a very important aspect which has to be noted is this. So now, trauma bonding, as I had given here, this is one thing which women have to note, which everybody has to note. So if a woman experiences abuse from a partner who also showers love on her, they learn to associate love with abuse. They often rationalize, justify, or minimize the abuse and are less likely to report it. So they, when the same partner, when he showers love and at the same time abuses her, so the confusion happens. So they often they try to rationalize and they justify, and that is trauma bonding as such there. So this worthlessness and helplessness in women. So what are we going to do if such situations arises? So even when we have natural disasters, the worst it is a woman, of course. Think about the situation about floods, when women have to move out of the home, out of the flooded region, to to a safer place there. So in such a condition, when they have to move out, if they are in their menstrual cycle is going on, or if they are in pregnancy is there, and other physical discomforts are there, how do they manage? We rarely think about such situations. We rarely think about such arenas as such there, where we have to think about these things. So when could we think? We could think when women gain power. So we have come to the next executive feminism, when women go up the ladder. But the case is that Vangari Maathai, so she says, the higher the ladder, there are fewer women there. So very few women are there. What is the trouble? They too are something who are subject to gender bias as such there. How are they subjected to? See, we have this new feminist movement. So women earn more college degrees than men. They hold more managerial and professional positions there, but still men rule the world. That is there. But that is one thing where this new frontier of feminism is, where when women succeed, surprisingly they distance themselves from other women, and they try to embrace change with the argument that what we need is this gender to stall this gender revolution. But more women in power might well lead to say they have to lead other people in that arena. So very important point in this executive feminism is, so these women, they are these women also come under criticism. So executive feminism is where they all have people you'd say. So why should they talk about feminism? Because they are something, they have all these people for their support. They have nannies, they have gardeners. What do they know about an average woman's struggles? Yes, that is a question there. But one thing what we have to, so this is a backlash that is holding women back, and that is a subject where women themselves pose on these women who go up the ladder as such there. This pattern we have to watch in, we have to deeply watch these patterns as such there. So how women from all walks of life have watched, and they have, when they have another woman, so what they get into certain times, they get into a feud, a fight with this woman as such there. And so these, we have these role models. But one thing is, these powerful women too, there is backlash there. So women, they themselves say, so how do they know about our struggles as such there? And not women support these women, not, it is not men alone, it is, we have to highlight how this women, society is lingering discomfort with powerful women. So what the message is, wealth is unseemly in a woman. So we have women belonging to corporate families who make it very clear that if at all they want to start their own business, they are not taken seriously as boys in their home. And if they have to start their business, it is considered as a hobby. It is not, they are not considered seriously, as if they would run business as powerfully or as effectively as man. Now, scolding such wealthy and powerful women for their ambition, and it as if that the only suitable role for women is an extension of their role as the angel in the house. So this is always there. It doesn't mean that we are devaluing care work, but an important norm we have to understand is only when such women are in positions, they would draft, they would understand the difficulties, the discomforts in a woman's life. And so here, as I have highlighted, so women will never reach or thrive in positions of power and wealth if they are shamed or if their opinions are belittled. So executive feminism recognizes that even wealthy and powerful women are into gender bias, and the resulting clog is in the pipeline. It affects everyone as such there. So we it is if our automatic reaction is to criticize these women, we have to understand that doesn't mean she is not doing anything. She is doing something wrong. It is we are doing something wrong, and it is something where we have to lend a supportive hand to women who go up the ladder. At times it is academic jealousy, if it is so, or if we come across the professional jealousy as such there. Apart from facing the bias from men, women who are in such positions have to face the bias of women too. So we have to understand that women, we have to lend a help, we have to lend a supportive hand for women who go up higher in the ladder. So only if these people go, the policy drafting and all the other things would be possible for women. A very important thing is, when I read and when I teach Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, it is something where we have come a long way. It is 100 years now. In 1929, Virginia Woolf wrote this Room of One's Own. And nowadays, women, economically, when they are independent and they are able to have a house of their own as such there, but even that house of their own, do they have their own space? Is the financial control under them as such there? And is the decision making made by the woman? And in most cases, when I look around me, what I find is a big no. So you have your house of your own, but do you have your own personal space? And is your personal space a respectable, a dignified one? And you earn, but how many women know what is the technicalities in her pay slip? There are many women who do not even know what are the things that are given in her pay slip as such there. We have to unlearn and we have to relearn that the one who earns must have the financial control. So if she is able to earn, she will be able to even control her finance, to manage her finance beautifully and wonderfully as such there. So such things are missing as such there. And another one aspect which I always notice, when women assemble, or when women meet another woman, or when men meet another woman, so it is about social issues that men talk about, their salaries, about the other wider issues, whereas a woman's talk is something even now in Indian society. So I don't know how it is worldwide. It is about the family, it is about her own personal space, the dress, the health, and all these other things there. Of course, the priority for women is that, but we could also give priorities for other things there, and we could have a knowledge about other wider issues there. So even in our own Indian writing in English, we have only one woman, Arundhati Roy, who is writing about this social issues, or else women's writing is always about the domesticity, about women's life as such there. We have a lot to speak, we have a lot to write about women's issues. Of course, I don't deny that, but we also have to think about the other issues too, which are hampering us. We must be able to read in between lines. We have to read deeper, we have to probe deeper. As I said in the beginning of this presentation, when we always speak about the waves of feminism, we have not watched, or we have not given importance to what happened in the in between years. Why there is a big silence, why such peaks and valleys in this progress as such there. So feminist researchers have a very how the future of work. So we have to reorient itself there. We have to talk about the digital economy, we have to talk about the other things as such there, and how policies makers have to make a note, and it is not they must not sideline, and they must not keep away do away with feminist demands as such there, but we have to keep things, we have to highlight these things, especially as I said, in the present situations. There are a few stories which are being there on the air, but there are many stories which are hidden, as women's history is hidden. We have to record that. And in the present situation, when everything is going on technically, we still depend upon the other sex there. We have to upskill, we have to reskill, and we have to even empower ourselves as such there. And even if it is the household decision making, women is being a member of the labor force, and who's devoting a lot of economic responsibilities, that home second view as such there are a lot women who do the first shift at workplace and who come home to do the second shift at in the next period of day there, but not much is spoken, or not much is statistical data is given for that. For one, Martha Nussbaum, which I had taught very long back, so she records about the how there is no statistical data about the household chores which women do, because it differs because of the diversity of the culture, the geographical position, and the work as such, the nature of work where they are. We have to take into account that too. And we have to talk about, as I said, the unskilled, unorganized sector where women work, how their life is. And now in the present day situation, where they are not skillful enough to record it as we record, as learned women do, it is the priority, or it is a prerogative of learned women to record or to listen to such stories as such there. So we need more dynamic and proactive policies to to close this gender gaps as such there, to close the gap between the unskilled and the lower strata as such there. And coming on to the digital feminism. So now, in the fourth wave feminism, what I found out is how women have found out the platform, digital platform, where they could record, where they could post their own views, they could create their own blog, and they share their own experience. Of course, that is wonderful, but we have to notice the disadvantage in that. When we all record such things, usually this is one thing. When we speak about women's lives there, we are visible, we are mobile now, but are we heard even now? Who listen, who look into such blogs? When everybody creates a blog, and when everybody is going to record or register their experience there, it becomes scattered. I feel it is a scattered feminism as such there. When it is scattered, so it is something where it is not focused as such there. We have to be aware that whether we'll be heard. So with that, I conclude my PowerPoint as such there, and I'm ready to listen to your views and listen to your questions as such there. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes,
Uh, and as expected, it was a great and thought-provoking session, and I really mean it, because the viewers in YouTube were some of the members were so excited that they were giving high praise and claps, and they had strongly agreed to what the things that you had pointed out. And when it comes to the concept of feminism, I think you have talked about the predicament of women in today's world, covering all the perspectives at hand, the psychological, the sociological, and the moralistic perspective. And I think I would not want our viewers to wait anymore to come up with their questions. And first, the opportunity goes to the members of the Zoom app. Anyone who is interested to ask a question to Dr. Banumadhi ma'am, please raise your hands. Please raise your hands if you prefer to ask the question directly to Dr. G Banumadhi ma'am. Now I would like to ask Meera to unmute yourself and ask your question to ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, Meera. Please go
Hello,
ahead.
ma'am. It was a
Yes.
delight to listen to you speak.
Thank
I'm a research scholar. And I'm working on how power has been portrayed in a few select women writers whose work from India. So I was just
Okay.
wondering if anything has been written regarding feminism in detail in the Indian context, because that is one area where even I'm struggling. I get to read a lot regarding feminism and the latest post-feminism works from abroad, but hardly any from India. So it will be great if you have some suggestions for me to read.
This is the same question I asked long back when I attended such a session there. And the resource person said, even now, when I look into there, it is something because of the diversity of our culture and the geographical positions as such there. We don't have any theory as such there as we find it in European feminism as such there. And it is only something records of the lives of women as such there. We don't have any theory in Indian feminism. I myself often probe into such an arena to find out whether we have Indian feminism, but there are records of women writing about it, but not any theory has come over as such there. I have never found, but the same question I too have. I too have. You have some books on ecofeminism. You have Vandana Shiva writing on ecofeminism. You have other women writing, but not any substantial theory as feminine mystic as Betty Friedan has done, or Helen Sixu speaking about, or Susan Faludi talking about women, American women as such there. I don't find any such things as such there. So we don't have any theory as such. We have to write one, we have to create one as such there, keeping in mind the diversity of Indian the country as such there, the diverse culture. We have to keeping in mind, we have to write as such there. So that is the same answer which the resource person gave. You write, you start writing about Indian feminism. We have to.
Thank you, ma'am. Well said. And we have another question from our YouTube viewer. Kanwal Narula has asked, what is the difference between gender equity and gender equality and women's empowerment?
Gender, first of all, gender is something socialized. Sex is biological, as Toril Moy says, and gender is something where we have it is socialized as such there. And women empowerment is speaking about what are the arenas where women have to be empowered, and gender equality is talking about that social norms which are giving us this inequality as such there, gender inequality as such there, because this inequality is because of the socialization, and women empowerment is another point in view as such there. Yes, it is socialization which is there. These are two different things as such there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
And one more question from a YouTube viewer. What do you think about the strength of the other gender?
The strength, as Virginia Woolf says. So we have magnified, as the topic of this webinar goes, we are the strong gender, and we have to believe in that. How we are the self-worth, the self-esteem. In many cases, as I have seen in my own experiences, women are more stronger than men as such there. And it appears it has been because of anthropology. So anthropologically, it is, we have been dependent on dependent on men as such there. It started all there, for the food, for the as he was a provider, so we were dependent. But it is not so now. We have to understand that too. And it is not so now. So it is something where we prove ourselves that we are more stronger emotionally, and psychologically too there. We undergo a lot of psychological trauma, but we come up and we manage many things as such there. In order, I think every woman would accept how she manages both. Multitasking is something where women do very happily and very easily as such there. where I've never seen it is possible for men as such there. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to ask the viewers or the participants in the Zoom app to raise your hands if you are interested to ask the question directly to our resource person. Yes, we have Barasa Sarma. I would like to ask Barasa Sarma to unmute yourself and ask the question directly to ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes. Good
Am I
afternoon.
audible?
Yes, Rasa. You're audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Ma'am, I want to ask you something. Recently, we celebrated Raksha Bandhan all over India. So I was talking to one of my friends. She was of the view that Raksha Bandhan supports patriarchy. I was shocked because Raksha Bandhan, I don't think it supports patriarchy because if we look at history during our India's independence, um, in Bengal also during 1905 when separation of Bengal presidency was uh, happened. At that time, Rabindranath Thakur, he celebrated Raksha Bandhan in Santiniketan to unite the Hindus and Muslims, and also Raksha Bandhan.
Yes, Barasa.
Uh, are not people or the new feminists.
Yes, Barasa. Go on.
Don't you think it, ma'am?
I have to make it very clear. When after reading all this European feminism, India is far far better. We have to notice one thing there. Only in Hinduism we have a goddess. In the world religion, in the pantheon, we don't have any goddess in any religion as such. There may be Christianity or Islam or Zoroastrianism or Judaism or Buddhism. We don't have any goddess. We have in India, and we celebrate 9 days of Navratri for the female goddess. And you are calling from Calcutta, I suppose. And it is something where Durga Puja, how it goes on there. So the
No, ma'am.
celebrating
I am from Assam. I am from Assam.
Assam. Okay, wonderful. But you are nearby. So it is something where we have this custom there, and the solidarity, or one thing we have to make it very clear in Indian society. For Indian society, family is the quintessential unit there. We always foreground family. We sacrifice a lot for the family welfare, family benefits. We do away with all our personal desires for family, and family is a very important unit in our own culture and tradition. We go on, though society is changing. And Raksha Bandhan, where you celebrate this brotherhood, and where you give importance to your brother, it is something, I can't say that it is patriarchy as such there. Where comes patriarchy? I don't understand. So when you have Durga Puja, or when you have Navaratri, where our own people celebrate 9 days of festival for female goddess as such there, goddess, why not this Raksha Bandhan there? So this is something
Ma'am,
as a family we have.
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I also think that Raksha Bandhan is a tool to encourage, or it can take the message of universal brotherhood.
Yes.
Because in our school also we celebrated Raksha Bandhan, and we
Yes, Barasa.
patriarchy. So
It depends upon the view. So we
interpret
have
feminism.
yes, we have radical feminists who think like that. We have liberal
Yes.
feminists. We have a lot of divisions in feminism. There are fundamentalists for each and everything. If it is not so, so it is feminism is not against man. It is how amicable we live. Of course, with the difference, understanding the difference in the sexes, and how we live together. How we live together with respect, with mutual dignity as such. There, this is what it is. It is the attitude as such there.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think we have time for one more participant from Zoom to put forth their question. I would like to ask Mariam Ilyas to unmute yourself and ask our resource person your question.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Maria.
Uh, Ma'am, my question is, since we're talking about feminism, we usually says that it is us women who has to come forward and talk about feminism and believe in ourselves that we are stronger enough. But we hardly talk about things like what males of the society should do and how they should be, reacting to feminism. So I just want to know, what do you think that our approach should be towards the males of the society, because we are living in a society which is dominated by the males, and if we are not so inclusive of the males when it comes to feminism, I don't think we'll be very successful in understanding the entire concept of feminism. Thank you.
Yes, of course. As I said, as it was there in my PowerPoint, we have to teach men, first of all. We must have an understanding about the male views and attitudes and the physiognomy, everything as such there. And we also have to teach them. We have to internalize and socialize men to come out of this patriarchal view or this putting them into compartmentalizing them, that they have to be the breadwinners, that they must not be weak, they must not shed tears, such things as such there. So it is his priority that he must be the breadwinner, he must be successful, he must come up in life, all these things. And even doing work, household work too. So now I wonder how many are listening to my lecture in a relaxed manner, or plugged in with your earphone, cleaning the utensils there, washing the clothes. Or today is Ganesh Chadurthi. How many are doing that work and listening to me? Women, we do, in spite of we survive, we come up in life there, and we have to make it very clear to men. The work we do, we have to be vocal first of all, and we also have to make it clear to men what is their role, what is their role as such there. And certain things, attitudinal changes have to be brought in men as such there. So this is as you said, in many cases feminism, men talk about feminism as such, and men talk about feminism as such there, where they talk about the superficial or the upper layers, or not, they don't go so deep as women do, because we experience a lot of things, and we say it by experience what is happening to us there. And that would be when women speak about. So women should, as I said, must talk about, first of all, about their physical, about their emotional, about their psychological. And when they find out, when learned women find out why that such psychological imbalance happens, if it is post pregnancy or menopause, they have to record these things happen, and they have to let other women who are underprivileged, who are confused, to know what is happening in them. That is something where we have to enlighten both men and women. And it is women who, as Virginia would say, still it exists, still is exists, that we are magnified, we are the looking glass for men. We have to start being the looking glass for men as such there.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
So, that's all for today, ma'am. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
patient answering of all those different questions. And I would like to ask you once more about giving a final word of advice, or something that our fellow researchers could take home and develop upon in pursuit of their research projects.
Yes. One arena where I find it's missing is stories about working women. Working women, the stories are not much there, and it is not recorded too. And that is one arena where women have to find whether there are books or whether there are stories related to it. I never come across. So if there are stories related to, because the times have changed and women have come to the public, what are the difficulties they face? And it is not recorded as such there. We have to find and we have to write about that as such there, because the present day situation is, it needs so. Only when we write, only when we speak, the other gender will know, the other will know. So for us, they are the other, so they will know what happens in our lives as such there, we must we must come forward to write as such there. So it would be better if they focus on women who are in certain stratas. Of course, we have Dalit literature, but that is one marginalized. There are a lot of women in other sectors marginalized as such there. We have to write, we have to probe, we have to see, you have to do research on that arenas. And another one arena which is lacking is missing is stories about working women, and that is one arena which is needed. And of course, as one participant asked, Indian feminism. So try to find out what is Indian feminism, whether you could define Indian feminism, whether there is a definition, whether there is anything related to it there. Of course, there are people who had written about women's movements. There are people who write about it there, but we don't have except Spivak. But Spivak too belongs to, she has shifted to, she has written about Mahashweta Devi's stories there, but we don't have any such registers or records as Susan Faludi had done, or Betty Friedan had done, to talk about Indian women as a whole. So that arena researchers could focus on. Yes, sir.
Well said, ma'am. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving us a wonderful session.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Pri. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, viewers, now is the time for our much-awaited interview with Dr. Priyamvada Gopal, who has joined us live online, all the way from Cambridge, United Kingdom. As you might have all known, that Dr. Priyamvada Gopal is the author of the much spoken about and recently a very famous book, Insurgent Empires. And to say the least, she is one of the most important figures when it comes to the discussions of the post-colonial literature. And today we have with us a wonderful personality who would share all her views regarding the concept of feminism. And I hope we will have a wonderful show, a wonderful interview of IYAL, which will be hosted by none other than Dr. P. Sashikala, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Thiagarajar College, Thuthukudi. And before we move further, I would like to play some of the AVs that are related to this show called
All good things are best when they present the possibility of two contentions, a beginning and an end. Stay tuned for yet another brilliant interview from IYAL. This is the fourth episode in line following a wonderful succession of interviews we have had with some of the best writers in the world. IYAL proudly welcomes Dr. Priyamvada Gopal, one of the most powerful writers in the world today. She is the author of the much talked about book, Insurgent Empire. It was acknowledged as a wonderful addition to a vast ground in the field of post-colonial literature. Dr. Gopal is a faculty in the Department of English at the University of Cambridge, and she is also a Fellow of Churchill College. Having her with us online all the way from United Kingdom fills our heart with nothing but joy. We hope this session will serve the purpose of being a valid source to help in the study and analysis of the feminist perspective. Without any further ado, let's welcome our host Dr. P. Shashikala to start with IYAL.
Greetings to all. I welcome you all to IYAL, an exclusive session on interviews with literary legends. We are proud to have with us Dr. Priyamvada Gopal, professor from Cambridge University, who is well known for radical thinking and straightforwardness. I think she would be the apt person to be interviewed for this day's webinar, for she herself is a representative of this strong gender. We welcome you, ma'am, to IYAL.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here and honored to be invited. Thank you to the organizers and thank you to you, Dr. Shashikala, for chairing this session.
Thank you, ma'am. It's nice having you along with us. You have made it a point to be here on time and you have done your best to make this program a great success. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ma'am, shall we start with the session?
Yes, we can. I just want to say you don't have to call me ma'am. You can either call me Priya or Dr. Gopal, but really there's no need to call me ma'am.
Yeah, sure. To the first question, as we all know, feminist history can be divided into three waves. First wave feminism promoted equal contract and property rights for women, opposing ownership of married women by their husbands and so on. What phase of feminism women are in at present?
You know, I don't think that we can come up with a simple answer as to that question. And the reason is that different parts of the world are engaging with different sets of problems. And in fact, even within a single society like India, a single nation, different communities, different regions, different states engage with different kinds of issues when it comes to gender. So I'm not entirely sure that the liberal Western mapping of feminism into particular stages, as though it was all one very neat progression, is actually helpful in thinking about the real life challenges that women face in different parts of the world, in different parts of the country. So I think what we can say is that at any given time, different things are operative. There might be a struggle for jobs and education and healthcare, or there might be a struggle to be able to define one's sexuality. There might be a struggle to think about the whole distinction between genders, between sexualities. So I think that for me, rather than think about gender in stages, I would say that there are different overlapping challenges at any given point. And the so-called stage at which a middle class upper caste woman in Delhi might be dealing with the question of gender could be quite different from what a Dalit woman living in a suburb of Mumbai might be struggling with, because she is also struggling with caste questions or economic questions of a very different kind. So I think my answer to that question, perhaps it's not a neat answer, is to say that there are different so-called stages or challenges operative at any given point.
Yeah, told it right, ma'am. To the next question. From the diverse effects of the COVID-19 catastrophe around the globe to worldwide demonstrations against racism and discrimination, current events have shown that we are far from achieving equality. Intersectional feminism helps us cognize one another and strive towards a just future for all. Can you enumerate the concept of intersectionality in a feminist perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, broadly speaking, intersectionality actually picks up on the answer I just gave, which is to say that at no single point are we simply women. Okay, so we might be women in the sense of being socialized in different situations to be women, but on the other hand, we are also shaped by other factors. Intersectional feminism is a concept that comes to us specifically out of Black feminism in the United States. And it was really Black women saying, you know, on the one hand, we share with white women the burdens of being gendered female, but we are also Black. And that means that we are struggling in a different fashion than white women with questions of race. And similarly with questions of class or sexuality, straight women don't have all the challenges that gay women might face. A working class woman is dealing with the problems of being working class in alongside gender in a very different way from, let us say, a female corporate CEO or a banker who doesn't have the same economic challenges. So intersectional feminism comes to us really from Black women and Black feminists saying, hold on, yes, there is a shared struggle as women, but we also have to factor in the reality that different women are dealing with different challenges, and that race, class, caste, sexuality, all these things shape the specific form of what it means to be a woman in different places. And so intersectional feminism, I think its most useful contribution is telling us that we can't think about woman as an isolated category, that this is a category which is always shaped by, inflected by other factors, whether those are caste, class, race, religion, community, or sexuality, whatever it might be, but that you can't think about gender in isolation.
That's well explained, ma'am, well defined actually. Actually, we have heard of a matriarchal society where women are not disadvantaged by virtue of being women and where mothers are placed at the center of the culture. But in reality, was there ever a world where a matriarchal society thrived?
Look, I don't know what all the societies that have existed in the past or that exist in the present today. I don't know, what social structures there might be in places that I'm not familiar with. But I will say that I don't think that the end of patriarchy means replacing patriarchy by matriarchy, right? So I don't think, for instance, the fact that a woman is the head of the family, or that a woman, a great-grandmother might be highly respected in her family, I don't think that that is the opposite of patriarchy. I don't think we should be replacing one power structure by the opposite power structure. I think in its best, most expansive sense, feminism is about undoing the reign of any one gender at the top. It is not saying, oh, let us replace men by women, or let us replace fathers by mothers. it's really challenging the whole concept of having different gender roles entirely. So you can't really say that whether or not matriarchies have existed in history. And we do know that there are societies where women have historically held more power than men. I'm not sure that that's what the target of feminist thinking is. I think feminist thinking at its core is about challenging gender roles, and it applies as much to men as to women. I mean, even men, many men are oppressed by their own socialization as men. They may have power in a patriarchy, but at the same time, very strict gender roles, very strict notions as to what it means to be a man, or what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband or a lover. These can be quite constricting and constraining for men as much as for women. So I would say matriarchy, in a sense, is neither here nor there when it comes to questions of feminism.
That's well said indeed. The terms sex and gender are definitely not synonymous.
I've lost you. Dr. Shashikala, I lost you. I think you muted yourself. Hello?
Ma'am, I repeat the question.
Yeah, please. Repeat the question.
Yeah, I'm doing it,
Yeah.
ma'am. The terms sex and gender are definitely not synonymous, but they are often used interchangeably, though they are two different concepts. How would you differentiate sex and gender?
You know, this is currently a real bone of contention, certainly in Britain, in Europe, but also I think to some extent in India and other parts of the world. I think the opposition between sex and gender has been too easily made. Now, historically, that has referred to, gender has referred to the ways in which women are socialized, and it is assumed that there is a simple definition of biological sex. And one of the reasons that this particular sex versus gender binary has been complicated is the existence of people who are broadly defined as trans, right? As people who do not feel comfortable in the gender assignment which they have been given, whether they've been gendered male or gendered female. In India, historically, we have had what is known as the third sex. People who might have bodies that are defined at birth as male, and then they have a different mode of engaging with the world and with reality. So I think that the sex gender binary is too easy, and there have been all kinds of attempts to define what a woman is. So, or in recently people have said, well, you have to have a cervix in order to be a woman. And then it has been pointed out that many people who are quote unquote female at birth might not have a cervix. People might be born without a uterus. People might have a uterus removed. People are sometimes born with more than one form of genitalia, more than one sex organ, So I think that even biological sex is not simple to define. I think it's a very, very complicated question, certainly in scientific terms, who is female, who is male, whether that particular binary really even makes sense. One of the arguments that people, theorists from Latin America have made is that having just two genders is a very Western concept, that actually there are many cultures, and I would say there are cultures in India as well, including some Adivasi communities, where there is more than one gender, and where gender roles are not fixed or sex roles are not fixed. So I think that the question is very, very complicated. And I think that in a sense, we have to say that ultimately people have to adopt the sexual or gender identity in which they personally, their bodies, their psyches, their consciousness feels the most comfortable in. So I think, I can't give you a kind of 5-minute answer. What I can say is that it's a complicated question, and there is no simple distinction between biological sex on the one hand and cultural gender on the other. These are very difficult questions, and they also change historically and geographically depending on where you are.
Yeah, it's really very complicated to be explained, ma'am. And some of the countries even today have an excess of males and a shortage of females. How do you comment upon this gender imbalance in the contemporary era?
Well, what we do know is that there are countries, and that would include certainly China, where sex selection has led to a preponderance of people deemed to be male because of the privileging of male sex and the male gender. So how do again, I can't speak for every single situation, but we do know that there are communities, including many Hindu communities in India, and that there are communities in other parts of the world where men are given social standing and social power. And in fact, we know this also happens in Tamil Nadu, that there is a kind of, what is the word, a kind of pre-existing bias against female children, and that female children are often eliminated at a very, very early stage of their life, sometimes before birth, as in the case of female feticide, such that we are, creating an imbalance based upon our preconceived notions about which gender has value, which gender identity has social power. And that is a great tragedy that we should be alert to.
True, ma'am. No one should have poorer life chances because of the way they were born, where they come from, what they believe, or whether they have a disability. What, according to you, would be equality? How would you explain this term?
Well, Dr. Shashikala, you have asked a question that could keep us here all day. Equality is a word we use a lot, and sometimes, we don't actually know everything that we mean. So I'll give you a kind of maybe unsatisfactory but simple answer. I mean, equality for me is that all human beings have access to basic economic rights, the right to food and nutrition, the right to decent shelter, the right to healthcare, and the right to education. I think these 4 things have to be absolutely non-negotiable in any society. But equality doesn't just mean those things. It really, ultimately, what does it mean? It means that all human beings really very profoundly have equality of opportunity to realize their own individual needs, talents, and proclivities, right? So what we want is a world in which equality of opportunity is meaningful, so that everybody has all the basics, food, shelter, healthcare, education. And beyond that, they have the ground on which they can develop themselves as individuals, the way, and be able to choose how they want to flourish as individual human beings, but individual human beings who are living in collectives, who are living in societies, and therefore the kind of the needs of the individual and the collective are harmonized, that you don't have individualism at the expense of collectivity, and that you don't have collectivity at the expense of individual rights to the things that I have just talked about. So equality for me is, on the one hand, it's kind of basic factors that have to be met for all human beings. But beyond that, it's expansive. It allows human life and human creativity and the human mind to flourish at its fullest. We don't know what the horizons are, but we need to give people the very basics that make that flourishing possible. And unfortunately, we live in a world where the needs of certain individuals and some collectives are given more priority than the needs of other individuals and other collectives. And that is a world which is profoundly unequal. I mean, it is an absolute scandal that in the 21st century, we're now headed into the 2020s, that millions of people don't have food, shelter, healthcare, and education, including and especially in India, that this is a country which on the one hand has several of the world's richest men and is home to millions of exceptionally poor people, exceptionally deprived and malnourished people. And that is a scandal. That is a scandal of inequality that I think we should all be extremely concerned about.
Well said. And COVID-19 has made the situation worse.
Exactly, exactly.
It's believed by many that women have attained the state of equality long back. In what way the next step of progress, in that way, the next step of progress, will it be a display of feminism in a chauvinistic manner?
You know, I think that that's something of a red herring. It's not a real challenge because, as you and I both know, women are very far from having achieved equality, even in the so-called advanced West, even in middle-class white institutions like my own, right? So I teach in a very privileged institution with middle-class, well-educated people, men and women, and others with PhDs. And yet, overwhelmingly, the professoriate is male. The senior professoriate is, by huge numbers, male. So even in a highly privileged, wealthy institution, there is nothing like equality. Never mind in other sectors of society, never mind globally as a whole. So this whole question of will feminism take the form of chauvinism, I don't think we're at the stage where we need to address that yet. I mean, sometimes I think it's dangled in front of us as a false, what shall I say, a false notion, because we don't really have any situation where women have so much power that other people are oppressed, so that women are chauvinists, right? It's a bit like this whole question of reverse sexism or reverse casteism or reverse racism. Given the power structures where men still hold power, where upper castes and Brahmins still hold power, or where white people still hold power, there is no question of the reverse. There is no question of reverse chauvinism or reverse sexism, because we are simply not at that stage where that is even a possibility. So I think that I would say to you, ask me this question in 100 years' time, and then I will give you an answer. But right now, we are not there.
And that's so true, ma'am. How do you see the women's march that occurred in Washington in the year 2017?
Well, on the one hand, very, very important in the sense that it was saying no to the fact that a man who had been accused by multiple people, by multiple women of sexual assault, a man who had consistently denigrated women and gender equality in his speeches and actions, was now holding the highest office in the United States. So at one level, it was a simple challenge to that fact, and to the fact that, once again, public discourse where it was okay to objectify women, where it was okay to denigrate them as sexual objects, was back in power. So on the one hand, it was a display of female unity. But on the other hand, it got criticized or held accountable for the fact that its organizers had not necessarily dealt properly with questions of class and race divisions. In fact, it was criticized precisely for not being sufficiently cognizant of intersectionality. So I think the march was a kind of mixed bag. It necessarily and rightly called for women and their allies to unite against sexism and patriarchy at the highest echelons of the political establishment, but it was also held to account for its own omissions, for not thinking sufficiently, for instance, about the fact that the man who was encouraging sexism was also encouraging white supremacy and racism, and that fact had not been sufficiently engaged with. But that is the nature of all movements, that they have their advantages and their strengths, but they also have weaknesses, and we should not be afraid to talk about the weaknesses at the same time as we show unity.
So the advantages are to be highlighted, are to be taken into account.
Yes.
That's really nice. It was said that at one point of time, Charlotte Bronte received a harsh reply from Sade, stating that literature cannot be the business of a woman's life. What would be your comment on this statement as a woman and as an English professor?
Well, we know that Sadi and others of the time were so entrenched in patriarchal power that people like Charlotte Bronte had to write under the pseudonym Currer Bell. George Eliot had to write, whose real name, whose given name was Mary Ann Evans, had to pretend to be a man and wrote as George Eliot for all her life. So what we can see here in Sadi's remarks and the kind of context in which those remarks were made is that it isn't that women weren't writing. You know, women have written or spoken historically for centuries. And this is true in India as well. Some of you will be familiar with the wonderful 2-volume collection edited by Susi Tharu and K. Lalita, Women Writing in India. And that takes us all the way back to, Buddhist nuns who are, writing poetry, Buddhist poetry. So all cultures, including South Asian cultures, have a very long tradition of women writing or speaking up. But what we can see in Sadi's remarks is the effort that was put into shutting women up, into ensuring that they were not heard, or into ensuring that their works, their creative works, their political works did not see the light of day, or if it saw the light of day, it had to be done under disguise, right? So what we can say is that this tells us not that women didn't write, or that women didn't have talent, or that women didn't speak up, but that there was a concerted, active, and conscious effort in England, as much as anywhere else, to shut them up so that only male voices would be heard. And it is a lesson in the fact that it's not that women have not had a voice, it's that women's voices have been actively suppressed and in many ways continue to be actively suppressed in many parts of the world, and that we need to be alert to and attentive to the ways in which this shutting up takes place.
So it's been a suppression from then till now.
I mean, it depends. There are certain points in history when women have flourished and other parts in history where they have not flourished. But on the whole, the story of women's literature in more than one part of the world is a story of suppression or having to really go to great lengths to make your voice heard.
And you stand as a living example for a woman who has flourished.
Yes and no. I mean, this is where, again, intersectionality makes a difference. Yes, I'm a woman, but I was born at a point when India, for better or for worse, had begun to decolonize in certain ways. And therefore, partly because of the legacies of the Nehruvian model, women were entitled to an education in post-colonial India. But in reality, not everybody had equality of opportunity. I was also a middle-class woman. I'm from a Brahmin family. I'm from a family that was, my father was in government service. And so I had both class and caste privilege helping my gender situation, right? So it would be wrong of me to pretend that I somehow have bravely on my own flourished. I had the helping hand of the state. I had the helping hand of caste advantage, tremendous caste advantage, right? Because we know that historically, even though Brahmin women were suppressed by Brahmin men, Brahmins had basically, colonized the sphere of education. So I had that advantage. So it's a complicated picture where, yes, I've been very lucky to be able to flourish, but I had a lot going for me, a great deal of historical advantage and a great deal of class and caste advantage. So I would want those things to be in the picture as part of an intersectional analysis.
Definitely. Mary Wollstonecraft's feminist thought was shaped by her beliefs about human nature. How do you interpret Mary Wollstonecraft's idea, I do not wish women to have power over men, but over themselves? How would you interpret this?
Well, in a way, she says it very clearly, doesn't she? And she addresses the question that you had posed earlier about both matriarchy and feminist chauvinism, right? So she was really responding to people saying, oh, you want women to rule men. And really what she's saying is, no, that's not what feminism is about. Feminism really is about giving women agency, about, ensuring that the fact of having been born female or being assigned female gender identity doesn't limit you, that it allows you to be an agent in your own life, that it allows you to be responsible for your decisions, to be responsible for your actions. And it simply isn't a question of exercising power over other genders or over men. It is really fundamentally about having some responsibility for the pronoun I. Who am I? What do I do? What do I think? What are my decisions? Again, the I does not exist in isolation. People can never be 100% individuals, but we can create situations where people are able to make decisions about their own actions and wishes without being unduly hampered by gender or other identities.
Thank you, well said. Can you throw light upon the ideas you had shared in your first book, A Literary Radicalism in India?
Yeah, that book is nearly 20 years old, so I have to kind of struggle to recollect. Look, I did that book as a deliberate study of Indian dissidents, right? I've always been interested, both in that book and in the present day, with people who challenge the status quo, right? With people who challenge things that are taken for granted. And the Progressive Writers Association in India, which had branches all over the country, but I don't speak all Indian languages. I was most familiar with Hindi and Urdu, so I decided to study writers who were writing in those languages. And I found these writers, Ismat Chughtai, Saadat Hasan Manto, Rashid Jahan, and others, interesting because at the very moment that the nation was coming into being as an independent nation, they were saying, hold on, when the colonizer is gone, when the British are gone, what do we want this country to look like? Is it enough just to say, okay, now the Brits are gone and we are independent? And for them, that was not enough in and of itself. They wanted to use the opportunity to create a genuinely egalitarian society where women and working class people and people who were at the receiving end of oppression had a chance to flourish. And they were noting something that I think is extremely important, and it is often forgotten, that it is never enough just to have independence. just to have national sovereignty. That national sovereignty is meaningless if people are not freed from other forms of oppression, because colonialism is not the only form of oppression in India. And we can see that 70 plus years after independence, enormous suffering, enormous oppression of people at the receiving end of caste supremacy, enormous oppression of Muslims, enormous oppression continues of Dalits in different parts of the country, enormous suffering inflicted on Kashmiri people. But at the same time, we boast about having national sovereignty. And the question is, does everybody have sovereignty? Is everybody independent? Has everybody been freed from oppression? Has India really decolonized? And I'm afraid the answer is no. India has a long way to go before it decolonizes. And writers like Ismat Chughtai and Saadat Hasan Manto were raising these questions in relation to both India and what subsequently became Pakistan, which is to say, it's just not enough to say, okay, now we are independent from Britain, job done. We need to focus on our internal oppressions, our internal problems, our issues around gender, caste, sexuality, religion, community, class. We need to, at the very moment that we talk about the oppression of the British, we should also be asking questions about our own oppressions. And that's why I found them a very valuable formation to study, because I think that the questions that they were raising in the 1930s and 1940s, which is the period that I looked at, are still relevant for India in 2020, because they saw, I think they saw what was coming, which is the replacement of British rule by Indian upper caste elites. And the fact that independence would not necessarily mean independence for everybody. And that, I think, is what makes the questions that they raised very valuable.
So you still have it in your memory afresh, but you're able to share so many things about it, though you told that you have forgotten it almost. In your book, The Indian English Novel, you have scrutinized Manju Kapoor's Difficult Daughters. Can you elaborate on some of the unique things you found in it?
Okay, now you're really pushing my memory. It is one novel out of many. I looked at that novel. I looked at that novel in a chapter which looked at the domestic. And it looked at the sphere of the domestic, and it looked at women's writing. And it looked specifically at the question of women's relationship to the sphere of the public and the sphere of the political. And I think one of the interesting things about that novel is something that we find in a lot of very powerful fiction, including in Indian languages, Tamil or Hindi or Bengali, is what is women's relationship to their domestic challenges and their domestic problems, and how does that relate to the larger problems that are occurring in the national sphere, in the public sphere. We have a protagonist in this novel whose name I cannot recall, but the protagonist is, on the one hand, she's very caught up in the independence movement and in student activism and in all the ferment that is going on in college and university campuses. Part of her just wants to, not engage with politics, to think about marriage, to think about love, to think about domestic life. And she's trying to make the two fit. She's trying to make the two speak to each other, trying to see if she can reconcile the very different directions in which she is being pulled. And I think, again, there is a certain relevance to all of us who, on the one hand, are engaged with kind of important political and social questions, but there's a part of us that just wants to, be at home, just wants to kind of curl up and just, not think about these large, difficult questions. So how do we reconcile these kind of domestic, personal, affective impulses, and then the kind of giant questions that the public sphere is posing? And of course, you can imagine that during the independence struggle, where everybody was supposed to kind of put the personal needs behind, to leave the self behind and throw oneself into the task of creating the new independent nation, you can imagine that that would have been quite a struggle to kind of subsume the self and throw oneself into the national struggle. And that's what I found interesting and powerful about that book.
That's nice to hear from you, ma'am. In your Insurgent Empires, you have tutored today's right-wing historians of empire. The colonized were not inactive inheritors of the knowledge of authority, but were active shapers of it, and not just in their own nations, but in the heart of the realm itself. What was the inspiration that led you to such a huge task of writing Insurgent Empires?
Well, I mean, there were different imperatives, but I think in relation to the paragraph that you just read, I mean, I think that one of the things I wanted to make clear is that cultural and political influence goes in multiple directions. In Britain, there is a kind of very long history of thinking that Britain has influenced the world. Britain has given the world certain political institutions or certain forms of transport or certain political ideas. But there is very little acknowledgement of the fact that people resisted the British Empire, and that that resistance actually had an impact on Britain, that Britain also owes some of its ideas and institutions to colonized peoples. And that was the kind of reverse direction of influence that I wanted to stress. And similarly, in other cultures, we often think that, and I think it's very true in India, that we think people above us give us things, and they bestow their benevolence and their kindness upon us. But actually, again, in India, a lot of things have been shaped by ordinary people, by people who are making claims, who are asserting themselves, who are pushing back against orthodoxy. And I think it's very important for all of us, but particularly in Britain in relation to the empire, to acknowledge the reverse direction of influence. And that was really primarily my goal.
Thank you. Fanon has acknowledged the important role women played in the Algerian revolutionary struggle, as well as gender differences between African women and men. How do you conceive the notion of feminism on reading the works of Frantz Fanon?
Well, in general, although he acknowledged the role of Algerian women in the Algerian War of Independence, Fanon did not take much of an interest, sadly and very, very unfortunately, in the question of gender. You know, there are really only a couple of places in his large body of work where he engages with women. And often that is used as something of an excuse to say, well, Fanon cannot be compatible with feminism. And I would say that that's the wrong way to look at it. That although Fanon himself does not engage with the question of feminism, because his thought is fundamentally liberationist, it is fundamentally about human freedom. And it is fundamentally about getting all human beings to a point where they are emancipated. I would say that gender emancipation is something that is entirely compatible with the way in which he thinks. I'm not excusing his blindness or his unwillingness to engage with gender questions. I think that it is a pity and a shame. But because he believes that all human beings have the capability to push back against oppression, to liberate themselves, right? Not to be liberated by other people, but to liberate themselves. and that it is not enough to have just national liberation, that the nation that is liberated must also fundamentally liberate all oppressed people within its borders. I think that Fanon's conception of human liberation and emancipation is entirely consistent with gender liberation and gender emancipation.
You have told it so well here. The goal of feminists to promote children's literature is to give children autonomy and authority to speak and to be heard. Is there a valid argument to validate the necessity for children's literature to have a feminist influence?
I'm not hugely familiar with debates within the realm of children's literature, but I think what I can say is that what children hear and listen to and read at a very young age shapes the way in which they think. So we know, for instance, that in the West, fairy tales, which have very fixed gender roles sometimes, the prince, the princess, the love story, marriage, that these things do influence the ways in which children get gendered. So that young girls, and even now you can see this everywhere in the West, grow up wanting to be princesses. And what we've heard, feminist writers say is that young children need to be given a greater diversity of role models and of ideas so that children are not just reading about princes, princesses, castles, and weddings. That they have access, because children are very eager to hear stories in all cultures. And because these stories are very foundational, because they shape the way in which we think, it's very important, I think, that children be given ideas that challenge them, that give them a greater sense of what is possible for them in the future, or what is possible for them when they grow up. So yes, I do think that something like a feminist, but also other kinds of progressive ideas, I think that children should be exposed to progressive ideas at a very early stage.
So the mother being the role model influences the children a lot.
Yes, but let us remember that it's not always the mother in all cultures, that we do have situations where we have single fathers. We do have situations where children are raised not necessarily by either parent, but let us say by a grandparent, a grandfather, grandmother, who, they might be raised by people outside the family. So yes, clearly the mother figure is very important. But she is not the only influence on children.
Thank you. The feminine mystic discusses the widespread unhappiness of women despite living in material comfort and being married with children. What do you think about the feminine mystic and its importance in the study of feminist criticism?
Well, it's an early text. It doesn't particularly ring true for many people today, because it was written to address American middle-class white housewives. And it was a book that was, in a sense, looking at suburban life in America in the 1950s and 1960s, where women, were by and large kind of cleaving to an ideal of being the homemaker, who kept a beautiful home, who kept herself beautiful, and then made her husband dinner in the evening. That's not necessarily true of many people's lives today, certainly not in middle-class contexts. But on the other hand, I think it pointed to something very important, that even if you're well off, even if you live a comfortable suburban life in a city, you can still feel extremely hemmed in and constrained, even oppressed by the narrowness of the role that you have to play. And I'm sure that's true for many women, even women who have jobs. I mean, we know thousands of women who have middle-class jobs in India or in America, now sometimes face a double burden. They have to be superwoman. They have to go, they have to earn a living, and then they have to rush back home and cook dinner and cook in the morning breakfast or lunch for their husbands and family before they go to work. So there's a funny way in which, going to work has not necessarily emancipated women. And I think that the feminine mystique, even though it's not necessarily directly relevant to many people's lives today, I think it identified the ways in which domesticity and staying beautiful for your husband, that these things had a role to play in oppressing women who were otherwise very economically well off.
That's so true, ma'am. In order to get ready for today's program, before this, I had to complete everything as a mother, as a wife, as a homemaker. After that, I could do this peacefully. But
Exactly.
not having done all that, it develops a sense of guilt in us as women.
Yes. I think Betty Friedan actually touched on that, the ways in which guilt actually drives women who might be otherwise comfortable, but that is the way in which, even when we are not explicitly being told to do X or Y, that internal voice that controls us, and that can be quite an oppressive factor in our lives.
So the devil is within us, really.
The devil can be within us, yeah, very much so.
Okay. How do you consider the importance of Black feminism in light of the events that occurred in US?
Extremely important. Just as I think Dalit feminism in India is extremely important, because both of these feminisms are saying, and I think this goes back to the question you asked me at the start about intersectionality, that it's not enough just to say, oh, women, that when you are oppressed by virtue of race and caste, those play a very important role in how you experience being a woman, how you experience patriarchy, how you experience feminism. So I think that certainly in the West, Black women have been at the forefront of the resistance to police brutality. Black women have been at the forefront of Black Lives Matters. Two of the most senior organizers are young Black women. Mothers have, mothers particularly of Black men, young Black men who have been shot by the police or brutalized in other ways, have spoken up about their pain and their grief. So I think that, the voices of Black women, the voices of Black feminists are absolutely fundamental to a movement like Black Lives Matters. And I would say, as I said at the start, the same applies to non-dominant feminisms in India, including Dalit feminism, because I think that it's very possible to be a middle-class, upper-caste feminist in India and not think about questions of caste. I grew up completely without thinking about caste because I didn't have to. So when I was a young woman, all my feminism was only about gender. I didn't think about how caste influences it and how class influences it, or religion, for that matter. So I think that these are feminist, non-mainstream feminist voices that are completely fundamental to emancipatory movements today, whether that's Black Lives Matter or anti-caste movements.
Thank you. In this ever-developing society of ours, do you think a gender-neutral language will serve the purpose of bringing about equality?
I think gender-neutral language always helps. It's obviously difficult to, go back and change the entirety of language at all times. But I certainly think that using gender-neutral language where possible, not making gendered assumptions where possible, of leaving open the possibility that different ideas or tasks can be fulfilled by different genders, I think it can ultimately only help, gender emancipation for all concerned.
How do you talk about anti-feminists who keep against the stream of feminism despite sharing the same sex.
You mean female anti-feminists?
Yeah.
Well, look, all structures of oppression rely on collaborators. The British didn't rule in India completely on their own. They had royal as well as upper caste collaborators. So patriarchy requires women to help it. I mean, we know from our own personal lives that sometimes the most oppressive person in the family is not your father, but can be your grandmother or your aunt, right? They are the ones who say, this is how you have to be, this is what you have to do, no questions asked. So anti-feminist women are part of the wider structure of patriarchy. Patriarchy requires anti-feminists to survive. I mean, in America, you now have a movement of women who support Donald Trump, for instance, who call themselves traditional wives, trad wives. And they are trying to urge women to back Trump because Trump, they believe, upholds a particular model of femininity which women should embrace. And now you can ask yourself, why is a man who has spoken so denigratingly about women, who has admitted to sexually harassing women, why are women supporting such a man? But that is how any structure of oppression works. It requires a degree of collaborators from the very class which it oppresses. And that's how I understand anti-feminism.
That's nice to hear from your side. It's not something from the outside always. It's a woman who has it inherent within her, how she's expected to be and how her children are to be. And setting this topic of strong gender apart, we would like to know something more personally about Dr. Gopal here. And the questions to follow are something like that. You have spent your childhood in India, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan, and attended an international high school in Vienna for higher studies back to India. And finally, you have landed in the United Kingdom. Many would not have had such an opportunity to have lived with various sectors of people. Which part of your life, especially the life in which place, do you treasure the most? Why?
The weird thing is that despite the fact that I have lived in different countries, I was pretty sheltered to about the age of 20, in the sense that, yes, I knew people from different parts of South Asia and some people in Europe. But, in class terms, I was pretty protected, very, very middle class. My father was posted in Vienna, which is why I ended up going to an international school. I had a kind of very sarkari upbringing. I basically, played with children whose parents were also, whose fathers generally were also government servants in India. I was pretty sheltered. But I think it was really when I went to JNU at the age of 21 that I started to get a sense of a bigger India and a bigger world than the one that I was familiar with. I mean, I went to Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi, which was great, which was fun, but again, extremely kind of homogeneous in caste and class terms. Largely went to college with upper caste Hindu middle class women. Didn't really learn much about India or the wider world. It's really in JNU that I met people from a non-metropolitan background, that I saw questions. I think it was probably the first time in my life that I saw caste being discussed openly. And even though JNU itself continues to, have a degree of, I would still say, kind of upper caste privilege, it was the first time in my life that I met people from non-metropolitan backgrounds, people who came from rural India, Muslims who had grown up in small villages in Bihar, people who were not upper caste, people who came from very small, let us say, fishing communities in Kerala. And I think that was an important time in my life because it did two things. It expanded my boundaries a little bit in terms of understanding what India was. But it also, I think, and this was back in the day, I don't know if JNU has been allowed to remain like this, we really did debate every topic under the sun. And everything was taken very passionately and very seriously. And things were discussed, into 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. There were student debates. I discovered student activism for the first time. And I think that I would say that was a very formative experience for me in the sense of bringing together intellectual work and thinking about the world as it existed, and in understanding that questions of inequality and emancipation could not be kept separate from scholarly work, from academic work. So I guess I would single that episode in my life out as very formative.
I think this question has turned you a bit nostalgic.
It has a little bit, yeah. Yeah, for a JNU that no longer exists.
We are really very happy that in spite of all these experiences in various countries, still India has its place in your heart. We are happy about it.
Absolutely.
And as a female professor, what kind of relationship do you maintain with your students? Do you have any specific reason behind it?
Well, I'm very, very fond of my students. I would say that at times when I had been really depressed about the profession or depressed about living in the UK, which sometimes is a real challenge, it's not an easy place to live in, students have really kept me very, very involved in the profession. They have always asked challenging questions in the classroom. They have generally been extremely frank. They have kept a connection going between the university campus and the world outside. They have kept the profession very relevant for me. I like to think that I am friendly with my students, that I have a warm relationship with them. But at the same time, I think in all honesty, I do keep a degree of separation between my life and their lives, in the sense that academics should acknowledge that they have a degree of power, that the relationship between students and teachers is not an equal one, institutionally speaking, and that because academics have power, it's only a degree of power, but it is nonetheless power, they should be careful about intruding into their students' lives, about completely blurring the boundaries between teacher and student. I would certainly say that I have seen cases, particularly when it has come, I'm sorry to say, to male teachers and female students, where I think that the boundary has been undone in troubling ways, where power has been exercised in ways that are not helpful. And I know, for instance, that young women in India and elsewhere have in recent years complained about the kind of behavior that they have had to deal with from male teachers, not only male, but largely male. So I think that one should have an affectionate and vibrant relationship with one's students, but one should also be cognizant of power dynamics and not abuse those power dynamics.
That's really nice to hear something very personal from your side, ma'am. You had assured us 1 hour for this interview, but curiosity in me forces me to ask just one more question. Can I proceed, ma'am?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. People who study English literature are generally categorized as free thinkers or different thinkers who make bold statements and take daring decisions. As a literature student and professor, what is your opinion about this?
You know, English literature has as many conservatives and reactionaries as it does have thinkers. Okay, if I look at my own department when I came in 20 years ago, there were some extremely conservative people there who simply did not want anything but the great male writers to be studied. They were not people I would consider free thinkers at all. So I don't think that English literature necessarily only attracts free thinkers, but I think that the humanities as a whole are attractive to free thinkers or to critically minded people because it allows for a greater degree of freedom of thought than, let us say, the sciences or let us say economics, right? Because you are given some discretion to push the boundaries of the discipline. So I wouldn't say that English literature only attracts free thinkers, but it can be a hospitable home for those who are inclined to be critically minded.
That's indeed a great answer for us, for professors and literature enthusiasts. The interview has almost come to an end. The questions from my end is over, whereas we have our viewers both from Zoom and YouTube waiting for a lively conversation with you. So over to Mr. Prem for the questions from Zoom and YouTube. Thank you, ma'am. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Of course, time just flies when you're having such a great topic being discussed like this. And I don't think that the discussion stops within the interviewer and the interviewee, but because I could see that in the chat boxes and in the YouTube comment section that people are arguing over the things that have been said, and it's such a great thing because this is the thing that we want. This is the thing that we expect from our audience. We want them to think about all these things, and it's just great. And so I would like to use the time for now to ask our participants from Zoom to raise your hand so that you could put forth your question directly to Dr. Gopal. I would like to ask Shri Krishan Negi to unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Dr. Gopal.
Krishan Negi?
Yes.
We're waiting for, question for you, from you.
Krishan Negi, can you please unmute yourself?
I think you can unmute yourself, can't you?
No, it's up to them to unmute.
Oh, they can do it. Okay. Okay. Sometimes the host can unmute.
Yes, ma'am, but I do not have that feature with me right now.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we move on to someone else and then come back to Mr. Negi?
We have this question from one of our YouTube viewers, and I think we can proceed with that. I hope so. This question is from Anita George. How far has the rereading of female characters in epics and myths lead to a change of perspectives in which women's stereotypes are analyzed?
I think it can be enormously helpful, because one of the things that we deal with in India is extremely selective versions of the epics, let us say the Ramayana or the Mahabharata being propounded on television or in Bollywood or wherever, right? It's extremely convenient for a particular version of these epics to be told. Now we know, not least from the work of A.K. Ramanujan, that there are multiple Ramayanas. We know from the work of scholars who work on these epics that there are multiple versions of these epics. And therefore, you will of course, know that there is a great pushback against, a thousand Ramayanas or different tellings of the Mahabharata, because these are also challenging. When you look upon a character like, let us say, Sita or Draupadi, not as victims, but as agents, then that is threatening to the status quo of people who want to have a particular version of Indian femininity to be propagated. So I do think that revisiting the epics and also kind of excavating the existing different understandings of how these epics are told are extremely important. I mean, certainly, there are feminist historians in India who have looked at different versions of how, a figure like Sita was very differently portrayed in different epics. So yes, I would say that is very, very important work to be doing.
Well said, ma'am. Highly insightful at the same. Now I would like to ask Farhana Hassan to unmute yourself and post your question directly to Dr. Gopal. Farhana Hassan, I hope I am audible to you. Can you please unmute yourself? So before
Farhana? No. Okay. And I wonder what's going on here. Can they not hear you?
They have raised their hands, but I don't think they are able to unmute themselves in some way.
Oh, okay.
Let's try another participant, Prayasha Panna. Can you unmute yourself? I think you have raised your hand. Prayasha Panna. Yes. Hello? Prayasha Panna, you have unmuted yourself. Can you please continue with your question?
Shakti, can you check if you can unmute? Because I have a feeling something's going on where they can't unmute themselves.
And now she has unmuted herself.
Yeah, okay. Yes, now you're audible. Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, how is consumerism related to women? Like, is consumerism used as a tool to propagate, gender bias? And sometimes women are accused to consume more goods and services than men. And even in our advertisements, they are very gendered. All the products which are sold, everything is so gendered. So I would like to know your opinions about this.
Prayasha, you've answered your own question. We do know that capitalism targets different constituencies, and that women are repeatedly targeted as buyers. And this can operate in all kinds of ways, in the sense that because women are the purchasers of domestic goods, they are targeted in relation to items of consumption for family, for home. But I think it also ties into the ways in which women, traditional notions of femininity in different parts of the world, can encourage women to present themselves as objects of consumption. And there is a very lethal connection between women as consumers and women presenting themselves as consumables. And the gendering of advertising, which you refer to, actually preys on both realities, on sexual desire as a situation in which women are objects of desire, of heterosexual desire, and therefore women are encouraged to buy more clothing, makeup, jewelry, in order to then further present themselves as consumables. Now, I'm not saying that clothing, jewelry, makeup is bad, but I think what I'm saying in agreement with the tenor of your question is that we have to be alert to the ways in which women as consumers is tied to the idea of femininity as a consumable, as in itself a consumable good.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Mhm.
And now we have another question from one of the viewers from YouTube. Raj Yasri Goswami has asked, in this pandemic situation, we find role reversal in domestic sphere where the man is also sharing hands with women. Can we say that the theory of feminism is in practice?
I think that where there are situations where men are helping, that's great. But I'm not sure that that is widespread the case. I still think, and studies still suggest, that women are disproportionately bearing the effects of the pandemic, because they're basically not only working from home, but they're juggling working from home with home duties. If it is indeed the case that men have started to take on their share of work, then it is worth remembering that it is their share of work and that they should have been doing it before the pandemic. And it is good that they now see the domestic as a sphere where they also exist and where they also have responsibilities. And let us hope that that continues to be the case after, if and when this pandemic ends.
Well said, ma'am. And now I would like to ask Ranjana Sarkar to unmute yourself and post your question directly to Dr. Gopal.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening. The session has been really amazing. However, I am a little curious about the reason behind your remark on Twitter, white lives don't matter, because your session has been so inclusive about everything that you just talked. But
Yeah.
What is really the reason behind this remark, ma'am?
So the remark has to be quoted in full. I said, white lives don't matter as white lives. If you selectively quote the first half, then it looks terrible.
Okay.
But actually it said, white lives don't matter as white lives. There is a long interview in the Times of India where I explain this. There's a long article in the Guardian where I explain this. What I said, and in fact, I also said, and this was contentious in the Indian context, I said Brahmin lives don't matter as Brahmin lives, which is to say that the criterion for a life mattering should not be whiteness or Brahminness, because these lives are already valued above other lives. So to say white lives matter is not the same thing as saying black lives matter. White lives already matter. It doesn't need to be said. Brahmin lives already matter. Doesn't need to be said. But it does need to be said that black lives matter and Dalit lives matter. So my comment was a very specific response to the aggressive insistence that white lives matter. And my point is that, well, why you don't need to say that. Because, it would be like saying in the context of female infanticide, baby boys matter. Baby boys matter. Baby boys already matter. There's no need to say it. Whereas female fetuses, female babies are not valued. Therefore, it is necessary to say female lives matter. So my comment was very contextual to the aggressive racist deployment of white lives matter as a counter to black lives matter. And it was qualified very importantly as white lives. Whiteness is not the criterion on which life should matter.
Thank you, ma'am. Because when I Googled you before the session, I found websites that quoted only this part of your interview, and I was very perplexed that why would someone so inclusive about everything state something like this. So yes, thank you for clearing it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I think the time is now for enough. Only for the last question from lucky YouTuber Jumpa. And her question is, in English literature, do you think sometimes unnecessarily innocent men get criticized for the crime they had not done for the sake of only being men by feminists?
No. I have nothing to say. I mean, this is a non-existent situation.
Okay, so event is now coming to a close, and I think we had a wonderful webinar this fine evening, and I would like to ask Dr. Gopal to offer, if possible, any sort of an advice or a motivating statement to the younger generation of women who go through the current predicament of the contemporary society. Anything you would like to share, ma'am?
Oh my goodness. Look, I think that given you're at this is under the auspices of Thiagarajar College, given that this is a kind of academic, I would simply say that education is an extremely precious resource. Education is absolutely vital to emancipation. Okay. I think that you will have seen in India, as much as anywhere else, that those in power attack universities, attack intellectuals. It is an absolute scandal that someone like Dr. Anand Teltumbade or Dr. Hani Babu are jailed by the government in India today. It is a scandal and it needs to stop. But I'll also say this, that the fact that the Indian state has found it necessary to lock up intellectuals and academics and lecturers, okay, to go around arresting students who have been protesting, that tells you how powerful intellectual work is, how powerful it is to be a student or a lecturer who challenges the status quo. There is no point in education if it doesn't enable you to speak up, not just for yourself, but for people who cannot speak or who are not being given a platform from which to speak. So value education, value what it can do for you, and value what it does for society. And please, please speak up for students, including in Kashmir, but also in Delhi and elsewhere, and for your lecturers and teachers. And I'm thinking again of people like Sudha Bharadwaj, Gautam Navlakha, the poet Varavara Rao. Poets, writers, intellectuals in decent democracy. I'm done.
Well said, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I hope the audience who are listening now are gifted with such a wonderful session and so many insightful points to get from Dr. Gopal. And I think we had a great show, ma'am. Thank you so much for spending your time by connecting with us online in this particular day. Thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I would have loved to come to Toothukudi myself, but perhaps we will save that for another time. And I'm really enjoyed talking to all of you, and thank you very much indeed from my end.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. And now, to give this session a proper ending, I would like to call upon Dr. P. Sashikala to give us the vote of thanks.
So we have reached the final part of the webinar. Gratitude turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos into order, confusion into clarity. It makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow, said Melody Beatty. So am I here to express my gratitude to all the people who have made this webinar possible. When the pandemic set in, the education system had come to a standstill. It is at this time the concept of webinars have sprung like mushrooms, multiplying themselves on a lightning. But we all know the crude reality too, that it has lost its place, for it is taken by many as a seasonal one. With the commencement of online classes, the webinars have reduced to a very great extent for people who did it as a pastime. But this period has been an eye-opener to us and has provided an opportunity to connect literature enthusiasts across the world to interact with renowned literary personalities around the world. It is almost a dream come true for us. Today, we have come to the end of this spectacular webinar. We have indeed ended it on a high note. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Banumadhi for her wonderful session on feminism, covering the various facets of it. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time with us. We owe our gratitude to Dr. Priyamvada Gopal for her remarkable interview with us. We thank you for participating so effectively and for having made this session interesting and highly informative. And your words for visiting Toothukudi is an extra bonus, a gift to us indeed. This webinar would not have been possible if it were not for the belief and trust our institution has laid on us. We express our wholehearted thanks to our President, Mr. Ilango, who has been highly supportive in our ventures from the beginning till date. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to our beloved Secretary, Mr. Rajendran. We thank our Principal, Dr. D. Nagarajan, and our Director, Dr. A.M. Tony Melvin, for their overwhelming support to make this webinar a reality. What would be the value of a show without audience? We are proud and grateful to the audience from 28 countries who have gathered believing in us. 28 countries, I would like to specify it here. Philippines, Nepal, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Indonesia, Pakistan, Tunisia, Yemen, Oman, Vietnam, Jordan, USA, Bangladesh, UK, Algeria, Cambodia, Greece, Sri Lanka, Morocco, Thailand, Nigeria, Bulgaria, Ethiopia, East Timor, Romania, and India. So we thank the exuberant participants who are so active and highly curious in joining us today. We acknowledge your buoyant involvement and dynamic participation. We have earned around 10,000 YouTube viewers and around 2,500 subscribers today. It is all because of your support that we have grown to this level. Thank you. Without technology, this webinar would not have been possible at all. Hence, we acknowledge our special thanks to Mrs. Gayatri of Thiagarajar College for providing us Zoom at the most appropriate time. I would also like to thank Mr. Saravanan, the Superintendent of Thiagarajar College. Mrs. Andal from the Department of Computer Science, SF, has been a keen advisor in technical matters for which we shall ever be indebted to her. Having thanked all, I would like to make a special mention of my bosom friend and co-convener, Mr. Prem, for without him, not only this webinar, but all our previous ones would not have been possible at all. He is the person behind the quality and coordination of this show. He has also done a great job by bringing in highly resourceful people across the world to enrich our webinars. Above all, he has been a moral support, backing me up every time I felt stressed out or felt low. Without him, 7 webinars would not have been possible in a short period of 3 months. Mere words would not be enough to express my gratitude.
Thank you.